Whilst trudging through the decidedly awful winter 2015 season of anime, I felt my heart sink as every single anime that I originally had high expectations for slowly revealed themselves to be nothing special whatsoever. Still, if you ask most people that are following new shows at the time, they'll probably tell you that if there was one show that was going places, it was Death Parade, a glowing titan standing proud amidst the chaos. And I totally agreed at the time. The show may have had the most outright exciting premiere episode of the year. Death Parade kicks off in a way that just demands your attention. Its stylish, gorgeously detailed animation, its tight, nuanced character designs, a banging opening theme. I was on board before I even knew what the hell was going on. More importantly, I had the writing to back it up, particularly in the brilliant way the episode is structured. Two lovers find themselves suddenly trapped in a vaguely ominous labyrinth that slowly dawns on them their lives are potentially at stake. It's all particularly effective since the audience shares their anxiety and frustration. We too have been given no context whatsoever as to the scenario we've been dropped in, and pretty much just along for the ride. The sleek, emotionless bartender's sparing dialogue and equal parts passive and intimidating aura make him that much more enigmatic. Over the course of the billiards game the episode is framed around, we gradually watch our supposed audience stand-ins unravel, becoming progressively more apprehensive and emotionally vulnerable, blurring the line between whether they're hurting each other intentionally or not, and becoming needlessly aggressive and judgmental with next to no input from the bartender himself. The memories return to them in bits and pieces, along with all of their fears and insecurities. One thing leads to another, and within minutes the husband is guilty of attempted murder while the wife reveals that she's been cheating on him. Thematically, Death Parade plays around with the idea of the average person being capable of unspeakable acts of evil and betrayal. That what we consider to be normal behavior is just another form of crazy that society is a little bit more comfortable with. That a human's true nature can only be revealed once they're put in a truly exceptional situation. And slowly the reality of Death Parade slowly dawns on the viewer. The bartender's larger goal and throughout the episode was to pass judgment on recently passed souls and decide which are worthy of reincarnation and which are banished to the void, suggesting that a person's morality has less to do with their interactions and upbringing rather than the innate purity of their souls. Anyway, Decim only considers it appropriate to judge a person's soul for seeing them for what they truly are, which can only be achieved through a vitriol game of billiards, I guess. Which is awesome. The show's concept and theming was so brilliant to me that I was immediately hyped to see where it was going and learn more about the lore. I enjoyed this episode so much that I actually watched it 3 times while waiting for the next one, and I got about 3 other people onto the show just based on the quality of this episode alone. Everything is immediately destroyed forever with episode 2, which is largely a wholesale replay of episode 1 with director's commentary from the real main characters. It does serve to give us a few world-building tidbits, but I didn't find it nearly as interesting as I thought I would. But considering the bulk of the dialogue is details that the viewer probably inferred themselves from the first episode, I see no reason why this was necessary whatsoever. It's a pretty well-known fact there is literally no way to earn ill will from anime fans faster than repeating episodes, and the effect was very much felt. Suddenly, the most revered and talked about anime of the season was being dropped left, right, and centre by a community that was still shell-shocked from the Endless 8 6 years ago. Episode 2 pretty much set the tone for the series moving forward, balancing brilliant, thought-provoking concepts and ideas with backwards and idiotic decisions. With this episode, I found myself asking a few questions that I'm surprised didn't come to me from the very beginning. If the entire series is structured around newly dead souls being unknowingly forced into some recreational activity with next to no given context, how the hell is the show going to creatively present this to us week after week in a way that doesn't come off as massively repetitive? The short answer is it doesn't. Death Parade's manatee tank approach to storytelling massively diminishes the tension that made the first episode so engaging. It's not going to have the same level of stakes or be nearly as memorable every time a new stranger wanders into the bar, asks the same questions, gives the same curt reactions, slowly becomes paranoid and aggressive, gradually reveal they're crazy, rinse, lather, and repeat. In other words, there's a decent amount of filler in most episodes before we really get to the meat of who these people are and how they ended up here. This is such an awkward structural oversight that it blows my mind that nobody in production figured out they may have a problem on their hands. The only steps the show takes to combat this is by having certain characters react so unrealistically to their supernatural circumstances that it completely destroys any sense of engagement it may have had before, but more on this foolishness later. My huge issue with Death Parade, however, is how it massively runs the gambit of quality. For every episode that says something meaningful and profound about human nature, there's another one decorated with gimmicks and cliches for the sake of standing out. Episode 4 spotlights a middle-aged woman struggling to balance her celebrity with her family life, with stress gradually making her cruel and abusive. Alongside her is a socially maladjusted teenager incapable of expressing his feelings with his family, leading to him shutting people out. It's ultimately revealed that both of their deaths were the result of their own actions. However, even though both show remorse for their transgression, the boy is granted reincarnation, whereas the woman is banished to the void. Decim is given unmitigated responsibility to judge these souls, but I find myself questioning his metric for doing so. Is Misaki acknowledging and feeling shame for her sins enough for her to be considered a good person, or should her soul be judged entirely based on her actions? With all these interesting philosophical ideas at work, highlighted by fully realized and grounded characters, this episode gave me a lot to think about. Meanwhile, episode 3 involves a college student and his childhood friend who underwent facial reconstructive surgery to look more like a girl that he had a crush on. The only reason given for this is that she liked him as a kid, and remained so unbelievably in love with him that she was willing to change her life forever under the pretense that her new face would be enough to make him return her feelings. Considering this show had appeared to be a grounded commentary and analysis of humanity as we know it, these absolutely ridiculous and fantastical events had me scratching my head pretty hard. I mean, this definitely would have worked if it was implied that the girl was insane, but the episode isn't presented like this whatsoever. I'm supposed to see this as a touching love story as opposed to the stupidest, most impossible set of decisions ever made. To top it off, the characters are revealed to have died in a random-ass bus accident completely unrelated to either of their actions, and once they're informed of the whole reincarnation ordeal, their only response is to let them finish their spirit date? Jesus Christ. Episode 8 cleverly turns the show's tension on its head when Dekim and our nameless protagonist, who eventually does remember her name but I don't want to spoil it so let's just call her Nicole, are informed their next guest soul was a murderer, filling them and the viewer with uneasiness and uncertainty regarding which of the two guests is a potential threat. Letting us see the episode from the perspective of the Arbiters was a great way of making all of their interactions feel fresh. The grisly nature of the subject matter and the CSI-like way that it's presented gives this episode and the one succeeding it a degree of urgency that I didn't expect. Things get so intense that Nicole's empathy finally manages to get the better of her, which lovingly leads into a discussion on the character development in Death Parade. Nicole enters this series at the same time that we do, making her a perfect lens through which the viewer experiences most of the show. Throughout the series, she's the only character consistently shown to actually become emotionally invested in the lives of the individuals she is supposed to be judging, displaying a level of humanity that Dekim is completely incapable of comprehending. The Game of Thrones-esque madness that transpires in episode 9 is what finally causes her to denounce the Arbiters entirely, which has an immediate effect on Dekim. I found myself massively questioning Dekim's resolve when his entire worldview is changed in minutes by a girl who's barely been here for a month. The easy way of putting this is that Dekim, with a little help from his friends, realizes that it's impossible to pass judgment on humanity while also completely ignoring the fundamentals of human nature. A lesson that ends up being more trouble than it's worth, but if I say any more, I'm probably going into spoiler territory, so... Anyway, the point is, what the Arbiters were doing wasn't gauging the true evil lying dormant within a person's soul, but rather intentionally concocting an artificial scenario that would likely bring out a person's most animalistic impulses, making the results flawed and fallacious. It's pretty much the equivalent to realizing that reviews are meaningless considering how swayed they are to an individual's biases. This retroactively makes some of the previous episode's themes that much less interesting considering how contentious some of Dekim's judgments are revealed to be. I was left wondering how no Arbiter had stumbled upon this fact before, or how nobody expected Dekim's values to be so massively shaken in such a short amount of time. We are constantly being reminded of the rule: Arbiters cannot have emotions, even though that's very clearly not the case, so ostensibly the rule is Arbiters shouldn't have emotions? Since so much of the show is focused on the death game structure, there is next to no time to develop any of the other characters into interesting people besides Dekim and Nicole, so I found myself forgetting they even existed outside of seeing them in the opening theme. The series hits its absolute lowest point in episode 6, which dedicates an entire episode to pointless fan service starring a teenage girl and some pretty boy pop star. In addition to intentionally abandoning the tone and atmosphere that made the early moments of the show so cool, it also completely destroys our engagement by failing to give me any decent reason to why anything here is happening. Everything in episode 1 felt like a logical chain of events caused by the actions of the characters. Their death was caused by the husband's distrust and the wife's deception, giving a sense of narrative and thematic cohesion. The girl in this episode, however, slips in a bar of soap and breaks her neck. Yeah. The pop star situation at least feels more like a cause and effect series of events, culminating in a performance of his latest single for everyone at the end. I'm done. And that's pretty much my thoughts on Death Parade, an unbridled mishmash of brilliant and ridiculous concepts, the definition of ambivalence. For every shock, jumping, and contrived moment, there's a legitimately clever and thought-provoking moment, and it's really difficult to have an opinion on a series that so regularly performs a tightrope act between fantastic and nonsense. I could say something about the pretty inconsequential cast, who are largely defined by a set list of anime cliches. I could probably detail more of the ways that Dekim is gradually revealed to have the decisiveness and resolve of a 5-year-old, rendering his judgments of others as much more arbitrary than I ever could have imagined, but at this point I'd rather just wash my hands of it all. The hardest part making this video was forcing myself to finish the goddamn show. This consistent level of inconsistency makes Death Parade really difficult to recommend, but I can at least suggest that you watch the first episode, which has remained completely watchable as a standalone experience. But whatever. It wasn't terrible or anything. I guess I've seen worse.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!